I thought that with enough hard work, I could just achieve anything. Unfortunately, reality was quite strong. And I really learned that timing and the right co-founders and the right idea, they all mix into one. It's not enough to be smart and hardworking. I think there's a lot of people who are smart and hardworking. You need a mix of networking, of timing, of luck, sometimes pure luck.
Hi everyone, welcome back on Oleum. So I'm sharing that moment with Marcus one more time. Marcus, hi,
good to
super
be back,
nice to be with you. Cheers.
Good to be back.
So today, special day because we have Bogdan, the CEO of Orbotix, so a defense company based in Poland. So quite excited by the topic, given the unfortunate general and global environment, but very curious to understand, what's going on a bit more. So Bogdan, very nice to have you with us today. I hope all is well.
Thomas, a pleasure to be here, and Marcus, the same. A pleasure to see you guys, and looking forward to a great conversation today.
So really to kickstart the episode, so you are a Romanian national, so you were born in Romania. You studied across the world, so you went to the US, you studied at ETH in Zurich, so in Switzerland. You are like a serial entrepreneur, so you launched like previous businesses. You also had like a consulting career. And then now you essentially landed in the defense space. So can you essentially retrace the entire journey for us, maybe in 2 minutes, so we understand, where you come from, what you've done, and, how you ended up building that company?
Of course. So, I was born and raised in Romania. So I grew up until 18 in Galați, just at the border of Ukraine and Republic of Moldova, which gave me quite a bit of insight and a bit more concrete reality in terms of security. And then I moved to the US with a scholarship in 2005. So this was more than 21 years ago. Then I worked for a while in Utah and in the Bay Area. Learned a lot. I must say the American work ethic and mindset, completely different than the European one. Sometimes I can say 1 year in California was an equivalent of 5 years in Europe in terms of experience. And then I came back to Europe, to the Netherlands, to pursue a master. Then I studied in the Netherlands at Utrecht and then at ETH Zurich. In the meantime, I've also had a couple of months in Taiwan learning Chinese. And then I started working in Germany as a management consultant right after I finished my studies in Europe. Did that for a long time across different countries like the Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, Spain, France, UK, and so on. And then in 2017, I did my first company in Paris, then my second one in Romania in 2018, and then things have developed from there. And lastly, now I'm in defense. I think that was sometimes in business, you just go where the opportunity lies. But this moving into defense for me it was planned, it was decided based on the war in Ukraine. I realized at that time that a lot of things are changing in Europe, and not only in Europe, but from a geopolitical situation. And I wanted to make sure that I contribute the little that I know or my experience to protecting Europe in one way or another, and making sure that our children in the future don't have to fight a future war. I would rather autonomous systems fight other systems or our potential adversaries rather than us being forced to send our children.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be, say, in a very short.
It makes sense. So before plunging into the modern times, so you mentioned that, so you built a business in Paris. What was that exactly? Why Paris in the first place?
Yes. So my wife is French, at the time girlfriend. She had to do her bar exam in Paris. She was studying law over there. And of course, I love traveling, and I took every opportunity to relocate to Paris. You probably, Thomas, I presume you are French. So
good spot.
Yeah, so Paris is amazing. So I loved it. I lived in Troisième for a year and a half in really the center of Paris. And during that time, I decided to take a sabbatical and do my first startup. At the moment, I thought I had it all. I had the experience, transatlantic experience, business experience, languages, because I also speak French, German, and Spanish. And I thought that with enough hard work, I could just achieve anything. Unfortunately, reality was quite strong. And I really learned that timing and the right co-founders and the right idea, they all mix into one. It's not enough to be smart and hardworking. I think there's a lot of people who are smart and hardworking. You need a mix of networking, of timing, of luck, sometimes pure luck. So yes, that was my first startup. As you can, it was sort of a eBay type retail, B2B, B2C with a double market. It was a full disaster. I failed dramatically after 12 months.
Well, thank you for being so honest.
Yeah.
I mean,
And we've all been there. So
most people who have done startups, they know how it is. To be honest, I have a deep respect for all entrepreneurs. It's really, really difficult and it has a huge toll on your mental situation, especially whenever you lose everything. So that was my situation at the time. I saved like 50,000 euros and I invested everything into my startup. I also got funding from BPI France, like 35,000. Like I was on top of the world. I had an office with interns, needless to say, no clients. So that was one of the lessons learned that I took. And after a year, I had to close the startup. And I like to see that experience as my MBA or my first MBA. I'm currently doing my second MBA. So it was a pricey MBA, but the lessons I've learned were brilliant. And Paris was amazing. So I was very happy to be there.
yeah, thanks for mentioning a little bit about your background. And I think it's interesting you talk about the emotional side of things when you're an entrepreneur. I mean, we've all been there. There's lots of ups and downs.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, that's just part of the journey. What was it like when you stepped away from your business and, you know, you were kind of describing like 12-hour days and then it goes from like a crazy 12-hour day to zero. What was that like for you?
I think that's a different part. So after my failed startup, I immediately I started working again, and then I created a new business with all the lessons learned from my failed business. And on the second business, it was sort of like IT outsourcing type, so IT services. In Romania, I applied everything that didn't work in the first business. To make it simple, I would say the only things I've learned in the first startup is what not to do. I literally learned nothing what to do. But sometimes by avoiding mistakes or mistakes that eliminate you from the market, you can succeed. So that's one of the things I've learned in my second business. And luckily, everything worked out well. And the business grew quite significantly. Now it has like, I think, 250 employees and about 20 million euros in revenue. And in 2022, in January, I decided to step down from that business. I hired the CEO. I created an organizational structure, board members, towers, everything. I was a management consultant, so that was my bread and butter. And going to your question, so I was working nonstop, like 12 hours a day. And all of a sudden, after hiring, to be honest, someone much more experienced than me in the role of CEO, I expected the transition would take like 12 months. Like most founders see themselves as irreplaceable. They think that I'm the key to the business. So if I go, they would need months and months to operate the business. To my surprise, and at the time I was actually quite happy, the new CEO, after 2 months, said, Bogdan, this is quite a simple business, what you've created here. Let me grow it for you, but I don't really need your support anymore. And then I went really from non-stop work to zero in one day. And I have to say, I was not prepared for that. As most entrepreneurs, whenever you are dedicating all your soul and energy into something, of course, you have hobbies, you like to read, you like to travel, you like this, but you don't have something that you do on a daily basis. So that was, I mean, it's a privileged situation to be in. So now I had achieved financial independence. I started traveling a little bit. And at the time, for the first 3 months, I would say were brilliant. I was relaxed, I recovered, I slept a lot, went to the gym. But after that, I realized I was missing a purpose. And then I had another 6 months of struggling Just literally did not know what to do with myself. And I realized I'm a relatively hyper person. I need a target. I need a goal. And that was the time also whenever the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia said, maybe I can contribute something to the defense of Ukraine, to the defense of European values. And that's when I started brainstorming. I started reading, investigating, and that kind of produced afterwards my third company, Orbotix. And that's why I think partially we are here today to discuss.
Yeah, for partially, like a lot for here. But so yeah, talking about Orbotix, do you think like in 2 minutes you could give us like an introduction on what you guys do, what you develop, maybe what's innovative about it? Because I would have thought that maybe like back then like there would be like other like sort of weapons companies that would essentially develop something relatively similar, but apparently no. So yeah, if you could describe what you do, that would be awesome.
So I will try to keep it very simple. In essence, imagine one person, a pilot, for example, a drone pilot, piloting a drone. It's one-to-one relations. So what we said, we need to overcome this problem. One of the issues in Ukraine that they don't have enough pilots. They are producing 5 million drones, but they do not have 5 million pilots. So we decided to fix that issue by creating a one-to-many relationship. So one pilot can fly 5, 10, 20, 50, and so on in a swarm. And in essence, that person stops being a pilot because you cannot pilot the 50 drones. Comes being an operator, or like imagine a video game. You have a tablet, you have 20 drones over here. You click on them. You say, I want you to go from A to B. And once you reach B, I want you to do mission X or mission Y. And of course, this one has to be pre-programmed. And there's also at the moment quite a bit of manual interface and work, both for legal reasons and technical reasons. But in essence, we allow one person to control a large number of drones towards accomplishing a mission, either in the civilian sector or the military sector. And of course, these drones have to navigate in a denied environment. That was one of the things we learned in Ukraine. If you need GPS or if you don't have anti-jamming equipment, then you might as well not be in the market.
Okay, understood. And so maybe like just to come back to the genesis, so you said when you saw essentially the war like starting, that was the moment where you said, okay, I need to do something. But as a business, how did you manage to essentially pinpoint that specific need in the market? Because I mean, even me, like, okay, I have an idea of starting like a drone company. I mean, you would need to go through some form of a journey to meet customers. I would imagine the customers are quite difficult. I mean, it's not like you have thousands of small and medium-sized companies you are selling to. You are probably selling to government, like armies, etc.
I mean, we also have a civilian sector, which ironically, those who generated our first sales, although we are defense first. But what we did from the beginning, we started designing, we started talking with special forces, with key people from the military to get insight. But this was just a small percentage of the reality. And so the first time we had the chance to go to Ukraine, and that was 2024, we went in with an almost fully developed solution, ready to go. And we got crushed. I mean, crush is probably a difficult word, but the Ukrainians used a lot of high-tech jamming. We were prepared for some of it, but for a lot of it not. So after that experience, we started interacting with them much more often, and we started creating an innovation cycle. So we redesigned our entire platform, not only the drones, but the printed circuit boards, the hardware, the AI chip, the software, the whole thing. So we started from zero. And that's one advice I would give to many entrepreneurs. Whenever we always get that advice, have your customers validated. And we never really do it to the fullest. That we lost like 6 months or 9 months by not really going there on the field to interview proper stakeholders. So that's why after we started doing this cycle and testing in the real field, we started getting a lot of insight and implementing that. And of course, it's a back and forth game. As you know, the technology is evolving so quickly nowadays, it's very hard to catch up. That's why one of the things we've learned in the process that we need, especially because we are partially a hardware company, we need to create pieces of hardware that actually we will do the software in a year from now. Because otherwise, every single time we have to change the hardware, and the hardware iteration cycle is very difficult.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's one of the main things we've learned, and I think we've done that quite.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I'm just digging into that a little bit more. So, I imagine with the feedback loop that you mentioned between sending a product out and then getting feedback back. Like, I imagine that as you mentioned, you already have to plan in advance with the software changes that you make for the hardware changes that might be happening in the future. But do you mind just talking a little bit about how do you make these hardware decisions, especially when the battlefield requirements are changing so quickly? And do you mind talking a little bit more about that?
Of course. So one of the difficulties that a lot of companies are facing is that they are trying to do incremental change. So they do an improvement, they go to the battlefield, then the enemy size, the adversarial size, they do another improvement and they counter your improvement. Therefore, within 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, we have to find something better. We decided from the beginning we don't want to play that game. There's already too much competition, too many players in the game. And as you can see now in Ukraine, there's so many drone companies. They're producing millions and millions of drones. We can literally not compete. So our approach was to look 5 years in the future and ask ourselves, what will it be needed? And as I said, we said 1 person to many drones. That was number 1. So it needs a certain kind of product roadmap in terms of swarming, in terms of technology like that. And the second one was that we realized the fight, the jamming, the GNSS is denied, no radio and the like. In the future, even with band hopping, it will not work. We realized we will not be able to have visibility or to control our drones 5 years from now. So the question is, how do we create a platform that sends a swarm of drones from point A to point B, and that the swarms take care of the mission by themselves? So that is our target. So now imagine Tesla with level 1 autonomy, level 2, level 3, level 4. Level 4 being it can drive by itself, you can sleep in the car, you can play video games. And now they are at level 2. And every time they do more software updates, but they know where they want to go. So they know to get to that point, they need 20 sensors, they need 5 cameras, they need these microchips and so on. So they've already, a lot of Tesla, the same thing as our products, we put in advance a lot of this hardware. It's a bit more costly in advance for us in terms of CapEx. But after that, the software team can simply deploy software in it. We test more on the software part rather than the hardware. So that was our way of fixing the problem. But trust me, hardware iteration cycle takes a long time and is not easy.
And sorry, you just mentioned in your answer to that, you mentioned band hopping. Just for people who are laymen like myself and have no idea about how this stuff works. So what's band hopping again?
Yes. So in denied environment, or that's the military term for whenever you are sending an aircraft or a drone into an area that is being denied from an electromagnetic standpoint. So there are 2 things that are happening there. There's the GPS denial and the radio denial. I'll start with GPS just to provide a little bit of overview. GPS is a very weak signal. So in order for them to jam it, they just send a lot of signals on the same band and they block it. You simply don't see it because something else is louder. They do the same thing on the radio. On the radio part, on the commercial side, we use 2.4 gigahertz. That's usually companies like DJI or Parrot and the likes. That's what they use. And in order to jam someone, you simply transmit on that same frequency much louder. So imagine I have a lot of energy and I have a big truck. I see a drone or an area where there might be a drone, and I transmit a radio signal like noise. And that noise drowns my own signal, and then the drone loses connectivity to me. So we are using band hopping and frequency hopping to jump in multiple frequencies. So we have a wide range of frequencies, the majority of the military grade, because it's not legal to jump frequencies. So if I would go now in Germany and I will say, yeah, my drone is going on 1.7 gigahertz, that is an illegal activity. It's literally not legal. That's why this is a very regulated market. And also for testing purposes, as you can imagine, we cannot just wake up tomorrow and test. We have to test to the military or we have to test in Ukraine. But that's what band hopping is. So they jam one band or one frequency, and our equipment simply jumps to another one randomly, to one that they unlikely to jam. They need to detect where we jumped, and they try to jam that again.
Because it's impossible to jam everything at once.
Everything is possible. It's just a matter of time and money. In essence, and in this case, energy.
Okay.
If you have a military base, they're probably going to spend a lot of money and a lot of energy in jamming everything. And in that case, they will probably do it. But imagine in Ukraine, the front is like 1,100 kilometers. The amount of energy to jam everything is like multiple times what we need for the entire planet. So it's physically impossible. What they do usually, they have certain equipment to detect drones or to detect radio frequencies. And then they said, oh, there's a drone at 1.7. Where is it? In that direction. Because you also have to put this equipment to shoot in one way. It's not 360 degrees. Again, you can, but the amount of energy that you will need is absurd. So
Okay, I got it.
it's almost never done.
So what you're saying is that this, in the future, like Ben hopping, won't be possible anymore at some point because of evolution of technology. So it would probably be possible to do what you just described. So it means, as you said, if I understood correctly, that the drone will be able to navigate without any communication line. Except at the beginning where I'm saying, go there, and then you'll do, I don't know, you'll destroy a truck, or you'll protect a regiment of soldiers or whatever. The drone will take the information, go there, do the job, and then come back.
That's correct. Yeah. So it is our
Okay.
expectation that in the future, the technology will advance to a point that they will be able to jam all frequencies. We don't have that. I think we're still far away, but we believe it's moving in that direction. Therefore, we are putting a lot of money and effort in our R&D. We are not there yet, but we are making the same as Tesla, multiple leaps, but we do it in incremental on our roadmap. And we would like to get to a point where our drone, first of all, now they navigate by themselves, but the final decision still belongs to a human. We want to get to a point where the human, the operator, defines the parameters of the mission. And once this, for example, as exactly as you said, you go there and survey or identify how many tanks there are, and then come back and tell us. Or if we send 50 drones, if there's military equipment, take it out, neutralize it. But of course, there's a multiple layers to this operation because we will need to know that that has occurred. So there's another ISR drone who has to confirm it, who has to come back. But we are working in that direction, that this identification is being done automatically, then that the drones can take that decision based on multiple parameters. The problem with that is the accuracy. So we are still not to the point, the same thing that Anthropic told the Pentagon, not 100% confident that this equipment is safe or this technology is safe. The same thing for us. Until the safety of this technology increases above a certain limit, we are not comfortable to put it in the field because you cannot play with human lives. So we take the approach that we do it incremental. And right now and for the coming years, we always want to have a human in the loop, an operator who makes the final decision.
Okay. So in that context, I would imagine that in theory, it's possible to lose a drone. I mean, we are not there yet, so I mean, it's really fast forward, but there could be a situation where I'm the operator, I'm saying, okay, you go there, you do X, Y, Z, but then it never comes back because, I don't know, there was a bug in the system, and yeah, so then there is a loose drone out there, potentially.
Yes, but the battery runs out. It usually crashes, and there's the equipment that you can, for example, just blow up the battery. You overcharge the battery, and then it just blows up. So because you also don't want any adversarial side to have access to your electronics. At the same time, even if they do have access, you need to make sure you have all the safety and cybersecurity elements in place that they cannot get any of the data.
No, makes sense. And so you said, okay, so first step was almost to go to Ukraine, test the equipment. So how did that happen as a business? So you invested money to create, let's say, the first prototypes or the first products. Went there with the products, and then you just found like some fighters and say, use that. This is how it happened, or it was for free? Like
more complex. So we started from the beginning. So I personally put about 3 million euros in the business. I realized this needs to be patient capital. This is a long-term plan, government contract. I never, in my previous businesses, I've never done business with the government. I actually avoided it, to be honest. because I knew it's very long term in terms of procurement. There's so many guidelines, and sometimes you need to wait 18 months, 2-3 years for a contract. This is just not feasible for a business. Therefore, I made the decision before not to engage with the government, but in this context, if you do anything with defense, it's B2G. Your customer is the government, because no one else is going to buy this type of military equipment, nor are you allowed to sell it to anyone else. Therefore, we spend quite a bit of time and effort in terms of networking, contacting different militaries in different countries. Orbotix, for example, is headquartered in Poland, but we have a presence in Romania and Spain, where we have R&D labs, also in Ukraine and in Estonia. The majority of the R&D staff is in Romania and in Spain, with some of the management and overhead in Poland. So we started on multiple levels this discussion with the government, with the military, with the Ministry of the Interior. We did the same thing in Ukraine, and we found the Ukrainians were very open. They said, anything you can give us, if you need anything in terms of feedback, we are here to help you, especially the Brave One organization. It's an organization set up by the Ministry of, I think, Strategic Industries, or the MOD in Ukraine, and they have done a lot to support foreign businesses testing in Ukraine. Of course, because we now have a subsidiary in Ukraine, we are part of certain clusters, business clusters, and we are in touch with a lot of stakeholders who facilitate all this testing or other types of activities in Ukraine.
Okay. How do you get the essentially that's very good, I guess. Well, you go direct to the user, so to get the feedback, create the product. But how do you get paid?
You sell
After?
drones, or you sell.
No, this I understood. But so you get the user, they give you feedback, but essentially they won't be the one with the checks.
No. You need to, what happens, the end user tests, provides you feedback. You get a loop, like you do it 1, 2, 3, 20, 50, 100 times, as many times as you need, until you have a good product. Then you start participating in official NATO exercises. For example, we've done in Estonia, in Spain, in Romania. Now, just in Romania, we have 2 more planned in the next 3 months. And there are specific exercises on counter UAV, or carpet bombing, or denied environment. And you go over there, you do this test, and then the operators, the special forces, the military looks and say, wow, this is actually something that I want. And then they put it in their requirements list. And usually governments afterwards issues RFPs, RFIs, and there's an ongoing cycle. The problem that we are facing in Europe is the long life cycle of this. And now things have started to change with the SAFE mechanism, which is a series of loans backed by the European Union at very low interest. A lot of Eastern European countries, like Poland, got like 15 billion, Romania like 17 billion. They're spending a lot of this money on this type of military equipment. And these are much faster processes. So by the end of May, they need to sign the contracts. That's why, for example, we are now on the SAFE list in Romania. We are discussing with different government officials. We are testing with the military. And the question is like to see what is the opportunity for Orbotix to support the Romanian government in these contracts. But this is a long-term contract. These are long-term lead times, even for discussions. And it is very challenging for a lot of companies who don't have that patient capital, because it takes a lot of money to keep a team working, to focus on government relations. It's not easy.
Yeah. And so in terms of like your experience that you've made over the past couple of years in terms of Ukraine and specifically, like, is there anything in particular that you would say that you've picked up specifically from, working within the Ukraine space? Like, has it taught you something about how to scale a business or anything else?
I think it's just the testing area that gave me a couple of lessons for Europe. And this is what I've been engaged lately in discussion with the government to try to convince them to create certain sandboxes in Romania, in Spain, in Poland. Because as I mentioned earlier, for companies like ourselves that we do military-grade technology, we need to test. We don't do ammunition, so this is not something that we produce, but we do technology that is categorized as defense. And for example, even the band hopping or no GPS navigation, this is military grade. And we are not allowed to jam ourselves. So this is an illegal activity. Like we asked our engineers, how long does it take to create a jammer? They said about 6 to 8 hours, and they can have it ready for tomorrow's test. But it's not legal. So that means every time we need to test, we need to make an official request to the government. We need to apply for a NATO exercise. We need to make sure NATO brings the right equipment or special forces or intelligence services. There's multiple stakeholders. While in Ukraine, for example, you go there, you call 2 days in advance, they provide the polygon, they come in with the most powerful equipment you've ever seen, and then they jump the hell out of you. And they do it for free.
Right. Okay.
This is something that we can definitely learn in Europe. And if we want to catch up, actually, it's not a competition with Ukraine. That's why I always say we need to leverage on what the Ukrainians have done and incorporate their feedback and their industry within our own industry so that we help them win the war and they help us get the latest technologies or to have that testing part. I would say the testing part for me is by far the most important.
So just on maybe a side note, so would you say that we have maybe too much red tape in Europe in terms of the military or the approach to business and military business in general? Do you think like we could do it a bit quicker? Or
I think that's an understatement. We are so far in the wrong way in terms of red tape that is not even funny. At the same time, I understand, you shouldn't be allowed to go and produce a 155 ammunition shelf just because you have the technology. You shouldn't be able to make a tank. But we need to distinguish technology that is for the supply chain, different technology layers from making ammunition. For example, ourselves and a lot of other companies, we don't make ammunition. Like we make technology that could be used in a defense scenario. And I think they need to separate those two because, for example, now there's a big discussion on dual use versus defense, and everyone thinks this is dual use. This is not dual use. If it was created with defense purpose in mind, it is automatically categorized as defense. And you need defense production licenses, trade licenses, storage licenses, import, export, transfer. Like there's so many licenses that a lot of times most companies with limited capital, they just start and after they close after 6 months because they realize, I cannot start working for another year.
So basically, to start like a company like yours, I mean, you need to be ready to spend a year with lawyers filing for licenses and applications of all sorts.
Or you need to leverage different European jurisdictions that some of them, for example, are more focused on licenses for import and export, but not on production. In some countries, for example, like Poland, you are not allowed even to do R&D or production if you don't have the production license or the R&D, the license. In other countries, you can do it, and they only need a license for export. So that's one of the things that I benefited greatly from my travels because I'm flexible. For example, whatever country allows us to do this, I go and I started building there and then leverage each country's individual advantages.
That's interesting.
Yes, for most companies it will be difficult.
Truly European.
Yes.
And you said you had to put 3 million in yourself as well. So as in, would it even be possible to launch a business like this without putting significant capital in?
No,
in order
unless
to do this
you
process?
are purely software. So one of the things that was, of course, I come from software, having a software IT company. I first hired 10 people. We started doing software. And then I came to the realization that what I was trying to do does not work on off-the-shelf components. So then I had to start hiring electronics engineers, aerospace engineers, integration engineers that had to design the electronics on which our software could run on. This is extremely complex and the cycle is much longer. So unless you are doing something specifically only software, you will not make it until you have a significant financial backing.
Okay. No, very interesting to understand that. Because nowadays it feels like you can start like a drone company like this and then...
No, it's very...
So maybe moving on to the market, I mean, what does it look like? Who are like the players in Europe? I mean, where is it going? For sure, I mean, the general assumption would be, I mean, the market picked up thanks or because of the war in Ukraine. Now other conflicts in the Middle East, etc. But how was the market before the Ukrainian war? I mean, who are the participants of that market? Where is it going?
So whenever the war started, I would say the market was very immature, almost literally non-existent. There were a couple of key players that were doing okay. None of them could compete with DJI or these Chinese brands. What happened, and our strategy from the beginning was, we don't want to compete on hardware. We don't want to produce drones. We want to produce a capability. And it happened that we had to produce the drones because our technology could only work on specific hardware. So it would have been very difficult or almost impossible for us not to do it. And again, competition is very complex and the market is complex. Right now, I think in Europe, we have more than 4,200 drone companies. So the market is massive. And out of this, more than 1,000, I've read that they received the financing from venture capital. This is a lot of companies doing a lot of redundant systems, a lot of hardware. Many, what will happen in the next 2-3 years, there will be a massive consolidation of this market. Many companies will go bankrupt, others will merge, others will be purchased by other companies, and the market will stabilize. But I think this is all part of the normal cycle of business development, especially at the beginning of a boom. And there are significant, usually there's a couple of players in each country. I think France has like Parrot or Hamatan AI, Germany has Stark or Helsing, Lithuania, they have UDS. And so there's a couple of local heroes, what I call. And you would notice in Europe, a lot of these countries, they give preferential treatments to their local companies. Impressive what happened, for example, in France, in which Dassault, so the defense company, invested directly in a company in Harmatan AI, like 200 million, bringing their valuation to 1.5 billion. And the company has almost the same number of employees as Orbotix, for example. But this investment, you could see, was clearly driven by a strategic decision on the government level in France to encourage local heroes. We all know the French are a bit more nationalistic from the economic nationalist from an industrial standpoint. And with what's happening in the geopolitical context of the US, rightly so, Germans, they recently woke up and they are doing the same thing. They gave, for example, a contract of 269 billion to both Stark and Helsing. That's a massive direct award contract. And why did they do that? Because they want the production in Germany. They want to create capabilities in Germany. And I think this is a model that we see more and more across Europe. And what will happen with the market dynamics in 2-3 years, as I said, there will be a move towards consolidation, and probably we'll go from 4,000 to less than 100 drone companies with like 10 or 15 a bit larger.
Okay, and so in those nationalist, let's say, efforts to push like local companies, do you think that's essentially good for both the business and the quality of the product? Because it feels counterintuitive if you push like a specific team who might not be the best to produce the best products. It's in such a specific market, because at the end of the day, those products are used to defend yourself, to attack, etc. So if you end up, because of that, having bad products,
Of course,
it doesn't make much sense, no?
the question is more, where do we see Europe in 10 years or 30 years? If we maintain the current fragmentation, so the decentralization that is plaguing us, or if there's a future conflict, like in Ukraine, there was an invasion. The West, of course, tried to help, but it was very slow. What won the day was the local production, was IT people, engineers that woke up one day and said, we need to do something. And it was very difficult for Ukraine. They struggled. Now, if a lot of European governments are smart, what they will do, they will encourage production in the local area, not necessarily for production's sake, but to create capabilities. You need to create an ecosystem. And of course, you cannot do an ecosystem in 27 countries. This is not feasible, but it's part of the competition game. You do it in 10 countries, and then you notice clusters going in Paris, in Berlin, in Warsaw, in Tallinn, and you can see this push and this move, what they call the drone valleys. And the more companies go to one area, the more it becomes like Silicon Valley or Shenzhen. There will be suppliers moving there, and it becomes easier. The market becomes bigger in those areas. So from my perspective, I think it's a normal step in the process. I think nowadays, given that other countries are pushing a lot of money in subsidizing their own industries, it would be dumb and I would say, just not okay for Europe not to do the same thing. I mean, China 40 years ago had almost nothing. And then they said, these 5 industries, these 10 industries are strategic. We are going to buy whatever they make, no matter the quality. Look at BYD, the electric car.
The car, yeah.
10 years ago, it was a terrible car. And now they have 5 million sales a year. It's it's an amazing number, and it's an amazing car nowadays. So it's a long process, and I agree with you. There will be a lot of wasted money in this process, but I think the consolidation phase that I was talking about just a while ago, it will solve many of these issues.
Okay, yeah, and so I watched like an interview of the CEO of Dragonfly, who was essentially saying that the main differentiating factor is actually the data you would gather through the drones, because I mean the drones act as sensors everywhere, so you accumulate data, you see things, etc. I mean, do you agree with that sort of idea, or?
The way we say it, and I'm sure if you have a hammer, everything is a nail. So if you work with data, you think everything is data. The way we say it, and because we started also with data and just software, and we extend it to hardware, and we believe now the key is in the integration between the different layers. I don't think there's one layer that will win the day. This is not a SaaS solution, so it doesn't work anymore. So it doesn't matter if you have the best AI, it doesn't matter if you have the best firmware or the best operating system or the best sensors that accumulate data. You need to be able to integrate that IMU, that PCBs, those AI chips with the electronics, with the motors, and then with the firmware, with the cameras. Everything needs to be integrated, and they need to work well together. So we believe the true value is in the integration part and the customization part. Everyone thinks we are going to make a drone that does everything. That is not the case. There are specific drones aimed for specific use cases. Some drones deliver medicine. Other drones do carpet bombing. Others do surveillance. Others deliver a package from Amazon. They are completely different, and the requirements are different, and the functionality is different, and the electronics are different. But I think that's how I would say it. Integration is key from my perspective.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. And so what do you think will, in your mind, will define, to become, a leading European drone platform? I imagine, there's so many different elements that come into play, right? It's a very competitive market with very high barriers to entry, like you mentioned. But what do you think will define, the leading ones in Europe over the next 5 years?
Sure. I think it's collaboration. I strongly believe, and it's not just because I'm a European, and I think working together is key to solving things. But no company can do it alone by itself. I mean, we are not Apple, we are not Microsoft to have or NVIDIA, and even them, they focus on certain things. This is the reason, for example, that we at Orbotix, what we've done in the past couple of weeks, we started creating a certain consortium in Romania especially, and we are working to do the same thing in Spain and in Poland with different companies that are complementary to us. For example, we've recently changed the PCB and PCBA production, so electronics from China to Spain, and that was like a 6 to 9 months process to make sure everything is accurate. We are doing in Romania, for example, we have testing areas now. We have a munition provider that they create a custom munition for ourselves. We have a partner that we work for a fixed wing drone, and then we provide them with the software and the ground control system. It's about working together and each of us focusing on one area. This, of course, will produce in 1 or 2 years this consolidation that I was talking about, because the government and our clients, they don't want a drone, they don't want a pen, they don't want a product, they want a capability. I need to go in that area, I need to do surveillance, and I need to neutralize something, or I need to have on my border protection something that covers 1,000 kilometers. That is, of course, a fixed wing, it's local drones, I need to be able to react. They want a full capability, and no drone can deliver that. And that's one of the feedback that we received from the military. They were like, stop selling us things. We don't care about your products. Is your capability that you are selling helping me to accomplish my mission? And that's something that we took to heart. It took a while to learn that lesson, but now we did it. And we've recently announced in the media, for example, a couple of partnerships. And there's a couple of really big ones coming as well in the next to 3 weeks that will support, for example, the safe contracts and scaling up. So I think that would be at least one key ingredient for future companies that will succeed. And of course, tons of money. So you cannot really compete with tons of money. So an alternative to that kind of collaboration would be massive venture capital invested in this area and massive contracts from the government. As you can see, in France, they go on the massive venture capital. In Germany, they go on the massive contracts. Those are alternatives to it. But of course, me coming from Eastern Europe, we have different possibilities than the Germans and the French.
And so still on the market side of things, so I understand the market, as you said, saw a boom because of the conflict. What happens to that market if, let's say, tomorrow there is a peace deal? Is everything disappearing and and then who do we sell to, or what the long-term dynamic?
So I would really hope that the war in Ukraine will finish as soon as possible, just for the pure reason that so many people are dying and the suffering that's happening in Ukraine. And no matter what effect it will have that on business, I think that should not be in discussion. That everyone's hoping in Europe that will end, but it will end in a just peace in which Ukraine will be able to get its territories back. That said, the reality has changed. The geopolitical situation has changed. I mean, just in the past year and a bit, since the new leadership change in US, everyone's thinking differently. Everyone's hedging differently. So unfortunately and fortunately for companies like ours, I think the demand will grow, not exponentially, but very steady in a certain direction. And we are happy to say that the demand from the private sector has been increasing substantially as well, because the way they say it, for example, in Germany, they had a situation in which drones were detected close to big industrial facilities. And then, for example, DJI came in and put a jammer on top of like a big factory. And for 4 hours, all the robots, everything in that factory stopped working. I mean, you have a factory with 2,000 people working and robots that stops producing cars for 4 hours. That cost that company millions. And it took them 2 days to figure out there was a jammer dropped on the roof. They had no cameras pointing in the
Okay.
in the
So
sky.
essentially, like the war event is just something that shakes up the market. People realize certain things, but it's here to stay. So
I
with
think
your
so.
example,
I mean, we are
okay.
seeing a lot of demand also from Latin America and from Southeast Asia, not to say Africa and the Middle East conflict that everyone is seeing now. The fact that you cannot go around drones. So this is a market that's here to stay, but it will be consolidated and it will be growing into a certain maturity level.
Okay, understood. And so you quickly mentioned financing, so VCs, etc. I mean, how does that work? Because I would imagine that most investment firms would have like a restricted type of mandate. So we don't invest in alcohol, we don't invest in tobacco, sex, and most probably defense. So how does
That is completely right. And if you look at the European Investment Bank and European Investment Fund level, they are still banned from investing in defense funds or in defense companies. They now, for the past year and a half, they switched to dual use. And they have made a really, really big fuss that they are allowed to invest in dual use. So if you get some satellite software, they can invest in it. But if you are defense, they can still not invest in it. And the problem that's happened, especially in Europe, this is different in the US. In Europe, I would say the overwhelming majority of venture capital funds, like more than 90% or so, they receive more than half of their money from the European Investment Fund or through different institutional investors that they have these guidelines, the one that you mentioned, Thomas. And if the EIF says you cannot invest in defense, then that cuts for us companies in defense, like the overwhelming majority of financing. In the US, for example, this concept does not exist. Like there is no institutional money. I think the only one that they have is something like IQT, which is like a CIA fund that specifically invests in defense. So it's a bit turned around than the way we have it, but they don't have any of those restrictions. So for us, it has been a massive challenge. I did not know this at the beginning. I thought this would be so easy given this war, given the geopolitical situation, strategic situation, I thought it would be easy. And it took me months, and it took the venture capital stakeholder that I was told, they did not know they could not invest. This was the worst situation. They did not know.
That's
And
weird.
yes, because they never invested in defense. It was one of those things, small text in their contracts. And then they went through the channels, and then they told us, wait a second, if you are defense, we cannot invest. So needless to say, I have wasted many hours and weeks and months of my life chasing venture capital that cannot invest. But after a very, very long time, I have very big lessons learned. So it got better after.
So how much did you raise, with whom? How did you find them in the end?
Yeah. So we closed our financing round in September last year of about 6.5 million euros. And the round was led by, unfortunately, we're very happy, by a US national security venture capital. But our initial point was to build something very European. That's why we started. We looked almost only in Europe. And we've also in Europe, again, no venture capital in the end was able to invest. There are a few funds that can, but in the end, we managed to start discussion with family offices that have a different horizon. They also can do whatever they want with their money, and they are what we call patient capital. And they understand hardware. So especially in Germany, they like hardware. They understand it's a 5-10 year project. So we got a significant investment from Germany. And the round, as I said, was led by BVVC, which is a national security venture fund from the US, and with whom we had a brilliant relationship from the beginning. And one of the main general partner, Joe Musselman, is one of the most interesting people I've ever met. Of course, this money comes from the US, and it shows another thing for Europe, that sometimes, and yet we are still not able to fully finance our own defense ambitions.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It seems like we are able, but sometimes we create rules to not let us do it.
That is true.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, the fact that you mentioned that you had to bring on board a US based VC, yeah, it is very very interesting. It's a shame that we have those rules, but I guess they probably will change. Just in terms of the question that, I mean, Thomas already briefly talked about it in his previous question for you, but just around like what happens if I mean, right now Ukraine is producing like 5 million drones a year, right? So what like I understand that you mentioned that the business the market is not completely dependent on war. But I mean, 5 million drones is a huge amount. What happens once the war there ends, or if it ends, and what kind of directions can these investments be driven into?
Sure. Again, I would be probably one of the happiest people to have that war ended. If and when it ends, it will end at some point, as all wars do. I think what will happen in Ukraine, there will be a lot of companies will go out of business. There will be a consolidation, and then those companies that have consolidated, they will try to find alternative markets. Those markets will be either in Europe via partnerships with other European drone companies, or it will be markets in Africa, Latin America, and so on. Keep in mind that although Ukraine is at the forefront of technology in a lot of things, they are better on the hardware part rather than on the software. And what they got really good at lately is producing cheap and in large quantities. But a lot of these drones are, for example, fiber optics drones. They are a cheap drone between 500 and 2,000 euros, and they put a fiber optics on it and it goes. But it's not scalable as a model. A lot of times they don't fulfill a lot of the standards requirements from NATO. And it doesn't mean that they will not. It doesn't mean they have some serious businesses now in Ukraine. Some of them produce 40,000 drones a month. I mean, it's amazing numbers. I mean, it's like China. So I think what will follow will be a consolidation and merger between Ukrainian companies and European companies. I also hope that Ukraine will be joining the European Union, follow at the end of a conflict and following the reconstruction that will happen. So for me, I'm very excited to start working with our Ukrainian friends to redefine the future of drones in Europe.
Okay, so like you touched base on some points. I mean, I don't know if it's an ongoing debate, but there are this idea like super sophisticated, very expensive drones versus the super, let's say, cheap ones? I mean,
No, 3 years ago, yes, that was the case. But now I think a lot of European providers have adopted. And I think American providers are still lacking a little bit behind, although the new initiatives from the Pentagon are changing the script and might produce completely different result in the US. But I would say from our discussion with our US stakeholders, they are looking at Europe and seeing us much more advanced than the American companies in terms of drones because of
Nice,
US.
nice. That's good
but on the field, is it? I mean, I guess it depends. It's probably a stupid question, but is it better to have like super sophisticated machines, or the ones that are more expendables? Maybe.
It depends on the scenario. I mean, look at what's happening in the Middle East right now.
Yeah, stupid
Iran
question.
is sending drones that are 30,000 euros. And for example, Iran has multiple types of weapons. They have from cheap drones, 30,000, to ballistic missiles worth 500,000. What they are doing first, they are sending the cheap drones, saturating the air defenses, wasting all the Patriots and other air defenses that the Gulf countries have. And whenever they don't have that many defenses, then they will launch the expensive weapons.
Yeah.
So you need the Patriots to destroy a ballistic missile. So you need very expensive and complex system. You are not going to destroy an intercontinental ballistic missile or a ballistic missile with a drone. So you need Patriot, or you need the equivalent of a technology like Patriot that costs millions, and that's normal.
A Patriot, it's a drone.
Sorry?
When you say Patriot, it's a drone?
It's a rocket that intercepts
Okay.
ballistic missile, but it can also intercept a drone. It's just you don't spend $4 million to intercept $30,000. That's why if you noticed in the United Arab Emirates, they even allowed drones to hit hotels or Burj Khalifa because they do not want to spend the Patriots on these drones because they are waiting for the proper ballistic missiles. So it's a multi-layer approach. You still need tanks. You still need fighter jets. You just need to incorporate the new technologies as one layer of the new fight.
So yeah, it completely depends on the use case. Obviously, if it's something simple, complicated, etc.
And
no, it's
imagine,
actually
just like a small digression, if there's a war between greater powers in the Pacific, I know we know who, it's going to be fought with fighter jets and aircraft carriers. So small drones won't play an action in the beginning of that conflict. So that's why use case is paramount.
Yeah, it depends. And so for you, I mean, maybe like you're talking about sea now, so air. Do you think maybe one day you'll start manufacturing drones on water?
Business person, so I go where
so
the
it
demand
depends on the opportunity.
is. But at the moment, I also know one of the lessons that I've learned in the past: to succeed in business and in life is not about what you do; it's about what you do not do. So we need, as a business, to identify a cash cow. We need to have a product that's highly successful. And then once we have cash from that product, we can experiment with different other products and then double down, triple down on the products that work. If there's a demand and, with money from a cash cow or investment or grants, we might do that if there's a proper demand. So I would say it would be opportunistic, but in the short term, we are very concentrated on just the things that work, because this is very complicated business. The technologies are not that easy. I think we have 10 or 12 fields in which we need an expert for each field. At the beginning, whenever I started Orbotix, I thought, I'm going to get a drone expert. So I hired myself a drone engineer and I said, okay, build a drone. And the guy was like, where's the electronics engineer? Okay, so I hired an electronics engineer. And they said, where's the integration engineer? So an integration, then C++, and then firmware. And in the end, I had one person, no redundancy at the beginning. So now we build redundancy and so on. It's very complex. So we are very focused. We know what we want, and we are going to concentrate on this in the next.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I used to work for an engineering company. I totally empathize with what you're saying. So, I mean, you mentioned the team, right, and the different kind of engineers that you need. So, a lot of people say that success comes down to the people, right? And would you say that that's true in your case?
Yes, I would say it's even more true than in other businesses. And the reason for it is what we discussed at the beginning. The innovation cycle advances so quickly, your product is not really relevant. It's the system that you build to incorporate the feedback and to react to that feedback as soon as possible. It was one of the discussions that I had recently with a government official in Romania. They were concerned that if they buy drones, in 6 months, they will be obsolete. And the discussion went across the line that we are building capabilities and R&D capabilities and production capabilities rather than drones. They should incorporate an innovation clause in any multi-year contract in which we as companies have to deliver the latest technology. Because 5 years from now is not the same drone. I mean, it's far, far from it. So yes, I would say the team is not only important, but it's critical. And not only the team, but the organizational culture. It is the way you set up the team, the way you motivate the team, the way the teams interact with each other. And we at Orbotix, we are quite privileged. We have in our team, like we have from Spanish, from Latin American, from Romanians, Polish, Ukrainians. We even have 2 Koreans that work in Seoul just because we found they're the best designers we could find. And we incorporate all of this know-how and all of this culture, but you have to build the layers, you have to build the communication channels, and they all have to believe the vision of the company and know that what they are working for is going to redefine the future for them and for their countries.
Right. So interesting. So you hired a team in Korea, and even though they were like the best, you were like,
actually, to be
despite
honest,
the fact you can't make it in the office.
Was someone from Korea, because initially we just wanted the design of a drone. And I had so many interviews with designers that were good. Yeah. But I was like, there's something missing. I need something exceptional. And then in the end, we found someone on Instagram, and the drone design was like crazy. It was like, this is absurd. Like, who did something like this? So we contacted them, and they thought it was like a fraud. They were like, money first, please. And we didn't even have the company then set up. It was just a concept, an idea. So it was quite interesting. And of course, this person from Korea afterwards introduced us to others. So we started growing the team over there. And for team events, for example, they came to Romania, they came to Spain. So we are very proud of what we create in terms of team. But not only is the way they interact with each other that is the key. So that's, I think, is paramount.
So that was for the team. As for you, so you're a business person, but it's a ultra technical company and job. So we haven't asked the questions, but I mean, do you have a co-founder? And if so, who is that person?
Yes, I have a co-founder, also non-technical. So it's Sebastian Straube. He's leading the strategy department and very focused on government relations and network and investment. He's a former venture capital. He worked in the venture capital industry. So network and government relations are extremely important, as you can imagine, in this kind of field. I took the approach. A lot of people, whenever I talk at my previous company, they thought I was a software engineer. They think I'm a mechanical engineer or I don't think you need to be an engineer to create a great product. I think it helps, but it's not mandatory. I've always taken the approach that I need to find people that are much smarter than me in their field and then let them do their work and reduce the constraints that they have. So I always see myself and the management team as a constraint remover. So we always ask our engineers, what's preventing you from going to the next level? And then we focus like crazy on those constraints. So it's been a challenge. Sometimes it would be nice to have someone like within the founding team that is specialized on that and an engineer. But in a field like ours, you will never get a person that can do it all. Because as I mentioned, there's like 10 different areas that they will need to be an expert. You may be an expert in AI, but you don't know anything about aerodynamics. You may be an expert in PCBs and electronics, but you don't know anything about firmware software, and so on and so on.
So the quick question about like what's Orbotix today, in terms of size, etc. So I'm sure there are tons of very confidential information, which would lead me to a follow-up question is, how did you deal with investors, when they are essentially pieces of information I'm sure you cannot share at all, even if they sign an NDA. Yes. So yeah, if you can give us some pointers as of, how big you are, where you're going.
Multiple layers of information. So for example, what I can say for public, we are now, I think, 43 people. within Orbotix, spread mostly around 4 countries. So Poland, Romania, Spain, and Ukraine. With a little bit with 2 people in Korea. I would say, and we have 2 production facilities, one in Spain and one in Romania. The one in Romania is being finalized right now, and I think we'll do a big inauguration sometimes in May, just in time for the safe contracts. And I would say, as I said from the beginning, R&D centers, Romania and Spain. Concerning investors, we had that challenge from the beginning, and we took the decision that we always sign an NDA before any conversation. So we sometimes have a 15-minute chat. If they want to go deeper, we have to sign an NDA. This, of course, most investors don't want to sign NDAs. They even, everyone told us from the beginning, we don't sign NDAs. And then we wished them well. And then after a couple of days, they came back and said they reflected and they're fine signing an NDA because of the type of industry.
Sure, the business, yeah.
At the same time, we still don't share everything because investors, most of the time, they have a portfolio of companies. Investors that are interested in drones, they probably already invested in drones and sometimes in our competitors. So we need to, our team has found a balance of what to share, just enough that they have an understanding that we know what we are doing and we have the capability, but not the fine details that they will be able to lift and shift certain parts of the technology and give it to someone else. So it's a difficult game. And usually, for example, in terms of investors, once we moved to, for example, the American investors or the German investor, at the next level, we saw each other in person. I mean, 3 months passed and we started negotiating. Then we shared a bit more, but always keeping in mind that it's a critical information.
Is it something you can share, for example, just the names of your clients and volumes, because it would give some sort of strategic information to third parties?
We usually don't share that. What we can share, for example, in terms of the civilian sector, we work with critical infrastructure companies that produce electricity. For example, like they have coal, gas, hydro, nuclear, mostly in the Germany, UK, and the Nordic countries. That's our focus. And the border protection. And that's over multiple countries. And then, of course, on the pure defense side, we never share any of the details for obvious reasons.
Okay, so you started with, but you mentioned the civilian side. But you started with military as your first vision, right? And then the revenues from the civilian side that kind of came on as a side product, right? Do you mind talking a little bit about how that happened? And
Sure. I mean, we started from the beginning. We saw each other not as a necessarily. I mean, we call each other off defense first, but but we had a dual use / defense perspective from the beginning because we wanted to do security, and we wanted to do national security. That goes over multiple layers. It goes from defense, it goes to protecting critical infrastructure, it goes to intelligence services, it goes to special forces. So it's a mix of a lot of different things, from surveillance and preventive maintenance for this kind of critical infrastructure, all the way to carpet bombing and kamikaze drones. So this is the layer that we did. We started more on the defense because we thought from the beginning, if we create a product that the Ministry of Defense and the soldiers and special forces, they say, I love it, I will use it, then it's much easier to take that product or those electronics, because we build everything in a modular way, and then transport them into a civilian sector. And this has indeed been a successful strategy, because whenever we started first discussion in the civilian sector, the requirements were so easy that we had to remove features. And even from a software perspective, our team spent weeks to remove features because they don't need band hopping because it's illegal as well for them. So we had situations like that in which we said, we can do it if you want, but then we realized it's not legal. So we had to, and our legal department is very strong and very compliance oriented, as you can imagine. So we don't want to take any risk from that perspective.
Understood. So maybe like as a more like generalist types of questions, I mean, you've built a couple of companies now, Orbotix. You mentioned that most of your lessons out of your first professional experience was more things not to do. Do you think you could come back on some of the lessons, like past and present? You could give us maybe if we wanted to start any sort of business or maybe a business in defense?
I mean, business and defense, I would warn you, that's very complex.
Don't do it.
twice before starting it. In terms of other businesses, I would like to make a separation between startups and businesses. They are different and they have nothing to do with each other. My first business was a startup and I did not really understand the difference. The second business was a real business and I took one of the lessons I learned that I didn't have cash flow. So I had actually negotiated with the client. I had a purchase order and I didn't even have the business. They asked for my VAT number and I was like, holy moly, I need a VAT number. I didn't have the incorporation of the business because I was so terrified that I would do something, invest again 6 months into a product or into a business without revenue. So I went to the other extreme and I said cash flow first. But that was a normal business. I provided a consultancy service. And then, after I created a business, we delivered the service per instruction. It's not something that you take a year to construct. Alternatively, I have another business that I have is called Flyward. And we do advanced aviation and maintenance software forecasting mostly for CFO departments or insurances for aviation. Over there, it was like more than a year and a half investment to build the platform. And only once we had built it, we started selling it. And then it was much easier to sell. So we had significant sales and now we're just scaling up. But again, that's the difference between startup and no startup. So one of the lessons that I would recommend, you need to have an investor or someone with the cash. The stress that comes from not having cash, unless your founding team, sometimes you are a developer, someone's an engineer, a marketing and a sales. You put together, you sleep on your parents' couch, and for 1 year you build a product, and then you start having traction. That works, but most of us are no longer 22 years old. We have kids, we have responsibilities, we have mortgages. So we need to have that financial backing. And let's face it, most successful businesses or startups, you need cash. It's not enough to have expertise. It's not enough. You need to hire 5 people, 10 people, 20 people. So it's not easy. So I would say get your capital first in order. Financing is very critical in order, and do a proper go-to-market analysis and strategy. This is one of the things I've not always done, and it always came back to bite me. And now I'm like, that's the first thing I ask, because I'm also a business angel. So I always ask, show me the go-to-market strategy, and then they give me a 3-page paper, and I'm like, you have no idea what's coming. That would be one of the things.
No, super insightful. Maybe one last question to close our conversation. If you could recommend one person we should have on the show, who would that be?
I would say maybe I have a good friend of mine that co-founded together with his wife InstaShop, I think, in the Middle East, and they had an exit like 5 years ago. So that would be Cosmin Mana and Ingrid Mana. It's like I know them very well for the past year and a half, and brilliant people, and they are still doing business, investing. So, and they had a very fast and aggressive growth for their company, which the exit was about 300 million or 360 million, if I'm not mistaken. So significant.
Good problems to have.
So little success.
Yes. I mean, so I would say them, or even our lead investor, Joe Musselman, so who has the BVVC fund. Every discussion that I have with him is extremely insightful, and he's done venture capital. He recently co-founded through his fund and himself personally, company that does 155 ammunition shells in Texas. I mean, this is like €100 million investment on day one.
Right.
Yeah, these are like, proper regular.
Go big or go home, as they
Exactly.
say.
That's his perspective as well. And so that's kind of type of character and person that I would recommend for a possible
Fantastic.
future.
Thank you so much, Bogdan. I mean, it was super insightful. For my side, I learned a lot, both about the market and in terms of business. I thought it was super interesting. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
For being with us, and we wish you all the best with the business, really.
Thank
you so much.
That was
a
great.
pleasure.
Thanks so much,
Cheers.
Bogdan.
Take care.